So I'll do my best. Michelle is out ill today. So
Oh, that's a shame.
Rick and I are going to be handling the meeting, and hopefully we don't mess it up too much. So anyway, Marshall Scott Collier,
Here.
committee member Chris Preston,
Here.
committee member Jeff Baker, committee member Vince Loyal,
Here.
council liaison Dave Berlino. And also present is Captain James Mundell. We have Assistant Chief John Bradley, Director Rick Brown, and City Administrator Steve Cross. And I don't think I've missed anyone. So thank you, Mr. Marshall.
Sure. I say we only have 3 voting members. Do we have a quorum?
You do have a quorum, sir.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Well, first order of business is to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
I
July.
have a question, Mr. Marshall.
Yeah.
Or a comment. First off, on regarding the attendance, Joe Hafer was in attendance last meeting for Metro West, and Joe's actually a battalion chief, not a captain. He's worked very hard for that rank, and I'd hate for that not to be recognized as official attendance record.
Absolutely. So noted, and we will amend the record. So are there any other concerns, additions, deletions that we would like to make?
I would make a recommendation to approve the minutes with a correction.
Perfect. So moved. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, say no. The minutes as proposed amendment are passed. So moving on, time for public comment. Is there anyone in the queue?
So any of the attendees, if you'd like to comment, this is the time that we typically hold public comment. So if you are interested in providing a comment on any of the agenda items, that would be the appropriate time to indicate so by showing your raise hand feature. I see Mr. Kenkel's got his hand up there. And if you want, I will allow Mr. Kenkel to talk.
Please.
Or would you like me to move him over to as a participant or?
Sure, whatever's easiest.
Or to a panelist. I can move him over as a panelist if you'd like.
Sure.
All right, he should be showing up. And Mr. Kenkel, if you want to unmute and you've got the floor.
I will note for the participants and Mr. Marshall, I will keep the time. There's a 5-minute time limit on.
Okay.
And so I will keep track of that.
All righty.
So is the floor mine?
It is.
Well, good evening, everyone. It seems that I was on this panel about a year ago to the date. Some of you I noticed, some of you I don't recognize. And I'm sure I don't know the agenda, but I'm assuming that Thunderhead Canyon is on the agenda.
It is.
Without going into all the concerns I've voiced before, I think at the forefront is really just a genuine concern from not only myself, because I guess I could take the brunt of it as the neighbors who are the most vocal, but it feels as though the city has somewhat ignored this issue. And I've been in contact with the mayor. I've talked with Joe Farmer, and Joe's actually a resident of West Glen Farms, lives right behind Thunderhead. So he's very aware of the issue. But I guess I'll double back on the when it doesn't feel like we're getting a lot of response is, and I've said this to Rick, I know he doesn't take too kindly to this, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of active things going on to mitigate or reduce the traffic and speed. And what I would say to that is, yes, posting a police officer to run radar occasionally may be a reactive thing, right? But what is the active steps that the city has taken? Have we put in any additional stop signs? Have we reduced the speed limit? Have we done anything other than do traffic surveys or speed surveys to already tell us that there's an issue? You know, I've I would say, an uphill battle in this regard, because I get multiple different, comments of, you need to work with your HOA. The HOA needs to work with the city. And then the HOA contacts me, but they say, well, you need to contact the next HOA down the street in West Glen Farms. They need to contact the city. Then we'll start talking about this issue. All the while, the streets are owned by the city of Wildwood. So in that regard, I don't really understand that. But really, I think it was Chris that, he's got 2 kids, 4 and 6. Well, I have 2 kids that are 4 and 2. And there is a massive issue here. And I realize that money is, the evil of everything. I'm not saying you guys are going to be able to fix this in a day, a week, a month, but to have some sort of plan laid out that the residents on this street would know that it's proactively being done would go a tremendous amount to help us. I'll pause there, but I can expand on many more, but I can note there are 3 additional intersections between Clayton and West Glen Farms where you could put additional stop signs, but there aren't. There's only one, which is at, I believe, Prospector, which is right here by my house. So, when we look for ideas, maybe it's adding additional stop signs. I had a candid conversation with Joe Farmer who said, honestly, we just need to step up, enforcement. Captain Mundell, I know you and I have had conversations, and when you guys did a speed survey, your note was that a ticketable offense is 35 or over. And my concern would be is that, do we really feel like somebody should be driving 10 miles an hour over a speed limit on a neighborhood street? Is that safe? I'm not saying you guys can be here 24/7. It would be great if you were, but it's not feasible. I would love to sit on a committee and say, let's bang out all the different options or ideas. But at the end of the day, it's just truly about safety. And, Joe, who's not here on the call, but he even said, I've voiced my concern to the city many a times, and I'm concerned that nothing's going to happen until we have a tragedy. My kids aren't allowed to play in front of my house because of the amount of safety concerns that are here. And I just don't think that a traffic survey or a speed survey is going to tell you what you need to know. I've invited everyone over here, sit on my driveway. I'll prepare a huge spread for everyone, beverages, and just watch. I flagged it, I hang signs out here. We've talked about signage. My neighbor has made signs that say, slow down, this is not a racetrack. I put the sign out the other day, somebody drove by putting their middle finger up at it. Signs don't do anything. It has to be more active. And it just, and I know that folks on this call probably aren't going to be happy with it, but it doesn't feel like any of those concerns are ever addressed. It's only a reactive response. So I would just ask, what are the active steps within reason that the city is willing or will take to fix this? Because I don't think 14,000 vehicles passing in front of our homes every week is a safe number. And that's documented in your traffic survey that you did last year. I'm happy to take questions, but I've got a list of notes here, but as I've said, I'm sure everybody's seen my emails. That's kind of where I'm at. If anybody has questions or comments or thinks that I'm crazy, that's fine. But I just don't think that worried about the safety of residents is a bad thing.
This is public participation, so there's no responses required at this point in time. This is just public participation. So
I can tell you, we hear your concerns. The city may have certain limitations in what it can do. I know there were, we did obviously, as you pointed out, there were the traffic surveys. I believe we have a proposed plan of action that we'll discuss later in the meeting because it is on the agenda for tonight. You mentioned, I just have one question though, if I may, stop signs somewhere on Clayton Road. Is that correct? Or the notion of that?
I think you mentioned additional stop signs on Thunderhead Canyon.
Thunderhead Canyon. Okay.
Yeah. I've removed him as a participant because his 5 minutes was up at that point, and it's not typically that we take questions and answers at this point.
Right.
Well, I just had my question was which were those intersections? Because I was trying to take notes and I missed that. Can we bring him back just for that clarification for mine?
No, we cannot.
We cannot.
His 5 minutes are up. typically the public participation is for us to listen to them. We can discuss it at the appropriate time on the agenda, but typically during public participation, we don't respond to questions at that time. It's just for them to express whatever they want to express, and then we move to the next participant.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cagle, for taking the time. I do appreciate it.
Mr. Marshall, we have another hand up.
Sure.
Mr. Brian Aston, and I'm going to move him. I assume it's a him. I'm going to move him over. Hopefully. And
hello.
hi there, you can go ahead.
Hi, I'm Brian Aston. I'm a resident of Dartmouth Crossing, and I wanted to comment on the one item on the agenda that has to do with the parking of Lafayette High School parents on Dartmouth Crossing Drive. And I know all of the neighbors are in agreement with your recommendations for that regarding new signage to be put up for that purpose. And we're hoping that it can be attached to the existing signage that currently is standing on the west side of Dartmouth Crossing Drive, which is the field side, and on the east side where all the homes are. I think they can be attached to the Ameren light poles if there's not already an existing sign there, because I think the existing signs now kind of keep the kids from parking there on our street. And for the parents that come over on our side and kind of jam up our road, we are definitely in favor of new signage with the hours as recommended, with the caveat that the one sign in the morning, I think it reads from 8 to 9 a.m. It should probably read 8 to 10 a.m. Just because of late starts and things like that. I think there might be 1 or 2 days out of the month where there might be a late start. But we are definitely in favor of what is recommended in those notes for the signage on the Dartmouth Crossing Drive. That's all I have.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for allowing me to attend. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And I guess if there's any other attendees that desire to comment, now would be the time to raise your hand. Otherwise, we will move on. And I'm not seeing any indication of anyone wanting to speak. Mr. Marshall?
Okay. Very good. All right. Well, thank you both for providing comment. Yes, Vince.
I have a question regarding the agenda. In the minutes reflect that at our last meeting, Mr. Cross had brought up about the issue of security at council meetings with a further discussion to occur at the next meeting. I don't see that on the agenda. Is that something that we wanted to discuss this evening, or has that been tabled? Or I think metal detectors at the council meetings was in the minutes reflect that we discussed it, and there was some discussion about a further discussion at the next public safety board meeting. So I don't.
Steve, please.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Vince, I'm going to be careful in what I say simply because this is an open meeting. And a lot of these discussions took place in an executive session, closed session. So the issue with regards to utilizing metal detectors for council meetings was discussed actually earlier this week at the Admin PW, Admin Public Works Committee. And it was approved at that committee to implement them. Now, Mr. Brown and I need to go back and have a discussion with Captain Mundell regarding implementing that and all the procedures, et cetera. But this has kind of gotten pushed over to the admin PW. That's the problem, unfortunately, with having so many different committees about who's doing what and so forth. So it is not on the agenda simply because it was addressed at admin PW. There's other issues that I need to address that I won't go into here, but that's why it's not on the agenda, sir.
And that's fine. I had seen in the minutes that we were going to discuss it and I didn't see it on the agenda. So thank you, Steve.
Well, thanks for bringing it up. I appreciate that, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you. Rick, I don't see anything for information. So old business, we have 2 items. First is discussion of the traffic study at Truman Road at West Glen Farms.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. This is an issue that has been in front of this board previously, so I know that most of you are familiar with it. Obviously, Chris is not. But the issue with West Glen Farms Road at Truman Road pertains to the close proximity of Truman Road and Route 100. If you're familiar with that area, Truman Road runs parallel to Route 100. It's literally within about 100 feet of the center line of Route 100. So what happens is, as we've discussed, is traffic at the signal, the southbound traffic on West Glen Farms backs up through Truman Road. So the left turners from Truman have difficulty finding gaps to turn onto West Glen Farms. And then conversely, the other issue that we didn't talk as much about is the southbound traffic has difficulties making a safe left turn across the oncoming traffic because it's so short in proximity to Route 100. Previously at the intersection, there were do not block intersection signs installed to try to help address this concern or these concerns. In the opinion of the department, they have been largely ineffective and have not really helped to address the problem. So previously, we did hire the professional services firm Lockmuller Group to provide a traffic engineering study of the intersection. And that work has been completed, and I did provide a copy of their traffic study to the board with my memorandum. We did ask Lockmuller to look at the intersection, review the existing traffic conditions, and make recommendations for short-term and also any potential long-term changes to the intersection or Truman Road that are feasible. So the results of their traffic study, quite frankly, were pretty much in line with the discussions we've had. They did confirm, they did a site visit and made some observations of the intersection in the evening period. They did confirm the issues we've been seeing with southbound traffic, backing up and cutting off the westbound left turners on Truman. They did point out that the left turn volumes are relatively light, and they felt that based when they were observing it, at least, those vehicles were generally able to turn left after the signal turned green. I should say they were likely not out there when there was a ballpark event or the traffic from the ballpark was departing, I'm guessing. So keep that in mind. But I think the bottom line with their report is they do seem to take exception with the close proximity of Truman to Route 100. They've expressed that there are safety concerns in their opinion with not just the westbound left on Truman, but also that southbound left, folks turning onto Truman from West Glen Farms. And those are both tied to the close proximity, the lack of time to allow folks to get a good look at oncoming vehicles from Route 100. So the final recommendation from their report is due to the safety concerns at the intersection, they are recommending that we modify the intersection and modify Truman Road to a right in, right out condition. Now, this is a little bit beyond actually what we may have talked about previously, because they are stating that we should restrict not only the westbound left turns, but the southbound left turns from West Glen Farms onto Truman Road. So their recommendation is to restrict it as a right in, right out only. Along with that recommendation is to install a raised concrete median island on the center of West Glen Farms through Truman Road, which would physically prevent folks from making those turning movements instead of just merely ignoring the signs that might be placed. So in the interim, they've also suggested that flexible posts that you might have seen installed elsewhere could be installed in lieu of a concrete median island with the same effect to prevent the turns physically from occurring at the intersection. So that is the recommendation from the report, and essentially that is the recommendation that I'm making to the Board of Public Safety tonight. I should note that I have forwarded this report to both the City of Ellisville and to Ryan Piercy at MoDOT. Haven't heard any concerns from Ellisville as far as reasons for the City of Wildwood not to move forward. I've also been trading emails with Ryan Piercy, area engineer at MoDOT, and thus far Ryan has indicated a willingness to cooperate with us in this regard and would support, at least based on my early indications from him, they would support this modification of the intersection. So I would say that my recommendation of making the changes is conditioned on putting in either the raised median and or the flexible delineator post. I think that's important to implement both together. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions from the board at this time.
Please, Vince.
Rick, I read the report. It's very comprehensive, and actually I have a much greater understanding what the issue was there. A couple of questions on, that's a MoDOT controlled intersection, the report indicated. So MoDOT would have to sign off, it sounds like, on the permanent changes. Can we put the delineators up without MoDOT having issued that approval?
No, the answer to that, I think, is no. We wouldn't want to do that without their approval. The intersection is under their jurisdiction, so as long as they approve it, we might be willing or able to do it physically, but we want them to be on the same page and approving that moving forward.
And my assumption is although they conceptually approve the idea, that they didn't indicate they'd be willing to fund the idea. Is that correct?
Well, to be clear, I haven't gotten that far in the conversation with them. Whether they would pass or request that the cost for them to make these changes be passed on to the city, I don't know yet. And I frankly have not asked that question. I guess our experience has been that they do tend to try to do that if there's costs involved with signing. We've seen that with changes on Route 109. I think these changes would be relatively minor. Even the delineator posts, in my opinion, their forces should be able to install those in relatively short order. So I would hope that they wouldn't ask us to pay those costs, but I don't really know that just yet, frankly.
And the last comment I have is I know that it sounds like when there's a ballpark activity, that's when the greatest issue may occur. Can we include in the recommendation perhaps at that intersection of Truman and where the ballpark enters? I guess in a perfect world, we'd like for eastbound 100 traffic to exit down to Ellisville Town Center Drive. Is that correct? Maybe direct them that way and westbound traffic to go on Truman Road? Is there signage we could put up?
Well, that is a good point, and that has been an issue that has been talked about. There is an option where additional wayfinding could be done, in particular for the ballpark traffic, to try to direct those folks to use Ellisville Town Center. That could be part of that. That obviously would require coordination with City of Ellisville as well as MoDOT, because some of that would be on MoDOT's right of way, some of that would be on Ellisville's, and it's all, just to be clear, that's all outside of the City of Wildwood. Yeah.
Thank you.
And of course, it's unmuted. So any other questions or comments for Rick? So we have a proposal from them that, we'll vote on here in a second. Any other questions or concerns?
Marshall, I'll just add one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Putting in those islands, would be helpful as far as us not doing enforcement or not having to do enforcement. It's a tight intersection. So if we were to sign it, no left turns or what have you, putting someone there to try and enforce it and then making a stop in close proximity to that intersection would cause an issue. So if there's construction, meaning a curb that can make traffic flow like it's supposed to, then it eliminates our need to do enforcement, on a tight intersection. So I certainly support that.
Okay, very good. Steve, you had something?
Yes, sir, Mr. Marshall. Rick, since I know the issue that we're waiting to hear about from MoDOT and so forth, I'm a little concerned. Did you say that you've had conversations? I know you forwarded the traffic study to the city of Ellisville. Have you spoken to the city administrator, Bill Scheer, about this, or anyone? Is there anything we need to do to make sure that does Ellisville have a say in this? I assume that they would. So do we have any idea of where they might be coming down on this particular project? And is there anything that I can do with my counterpart in Ellisville to help move this along?
Well, all I can say so far is my discussions with Bill Schwer, he has not expressed that they would be opposed to this. Now, as Steve, you and I spoke, I know that their mayor is probably going to take more than an average interest in it, because he does apparently live nearby in Autumn View Terrace. So there is always that potential. We have not heard directly from the mayor. We could certainly reach out to him and provide that opportunity, I suppose, if the board would like.
So you don't have any direct anything from Bill, well, pro or con. I will see the mayor of Ellisville tomorrow at a luncheon, and I will take him aside and ask him to find out. I think it's better that we know sooner rather than later, before we go too far down the road, if he's going to be a proponent of this or against it. So I'll try to make a point of sometime during tomorrow's luncheon to see if I can at least get a reading on how he feels about this, if that's okay with this board.
Okay, thank you. Vince?
At the last meeting, I think this is the first time I was exposed to this, and I kind of shook it off as, is this a big deal? And Rick indicated it was a big deal to the city, and I think Steve as well. And I'm fine with moving forward with this. However, I think when you compare this to the issue that Mr. Kunkel brought up about Thunderhead Canyon, that's been on the agenda for 3 years, I almost feel like I would be a bit disingenuous to give this a higher priority than the issue with the speeding on Thunderhead Canyon. So just know that when we discuss that issue on the agenda, I will have an equal passion towards making sure we do something to address that issue as well. I mean, we've already spent money on a traffic study regarding Truman Road and West Glen Farms, and I would hope that we would at least put the effort, a similar effort, if not a greater effort, towards the issue involving children and traffic on Thunderhead Canyon, which, like I said, at least 3 years we've been looking at it. So as we go forward, having said that, I will recommend that we, or make a motion that we approve the recommendation of the city's staff.
Okay. Well, we have the report on the floor. We now have a motion from Vince. Do I hear a second, Mr. Preston? There we go. Any discussion? So I think it's a good plan, honestly. So hearing none, all those in favor of supporting the plan, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. It's unanimous, it passes. Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next item of old business, Thunderhead Canyon. Rick?
Thank you, Mr. Marshall, and I'll do my best to present this. As Mr. Loyal has stated, this has been before the board a couple times more recently since I've been with the city, last year and the year prior. But as of more recently, Mr. Kenkel, as you heard from earlier, has expressed his frustrations with traffic on Thunderhead Canyon. And I think what I wanted to point out was the prior instances that it came to the board, the primary focus at that time was to look at the issue of non-local traffic. So that's the way it was presented to me, more as the issue. There's a high volume of traffic on the road. Not that the traffic is speeding, but there was just a lot of traffic, and a lot of it was expected to be non-local or cut through traffic. So tonight we're focusing more on the speeding side of that coin, not so much the volume. But just to give you a brief recap, Thunderhead Canyon I'm sure most of you are aware, you've probably driven it, is more or less it is a collector street, and it does serve as a collector street from Clayton to West Glen Farms Drive. And folks use it to access West Glen Farms to go to Green Pines School and streets to the south. It does have a posted 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. It is about 26 feet in width, and it serves as a functional classification. It's a minor collector. It is a collector street. It serves to provide connections from Clayton Road and bring traffic from Clayton to other neighborhoods beyond Thunderhead Canyon. That's just the reality of it. We did talk about the volume of traffic. Mr. Kenkel referenced 14,000 cars in a week, and that's not far off. We've done some counting, and the average weekday traffic number that we came up with was about 2,100 cars per day. So over the course of a week, that's probably about right. And as I've said before, that is a very high volume for a residential street. But of course, it's not merely a local street. It is a collector street. As far as a rule of thumb, we tend to get complaints, and this is just more or less my opinion, when we get average weekday traffic in excess of 1,000 cars a day. That's when folks start to feel like there's more cars than I'd like to see on the road in front of me. That is more of a subjective measurement rather than an objective measurement. So I wanted to throw that out to you. As far as the issue of non-local traffic, again, we talked about it in 2019, 2020. We did some studies internally where we put staff in the field in the morning peak hour and then the PM peak hour to basically count cars and track where they were coming and going. So, and the idea was to track the cars through from Clayton Road to Route 100 primarily. And so I wanted to go back and point out, when we did that effort in 2019, we did in 2020 last year, and in both peak hours, the amount of non-local traffic, or if you want to call it cut through, was about wasn't any more than 4%. It was around 4% of the total traffic. We did the same study in 2019. Now 2020 was pandemic. 2019, we had Route 109 under construction. So there was concern that was possibly impacting the numbers at that point. So in 2019, when 109 was under construction, we did see in the PM peak hour a higher percentage, about 10.4% of the volume of traffic was going between 100 and Clayton. It was less in the AM peak hour, about 4.6 cars or 27 vehicles. And by the way, in the evening, that was 50 vehicles. That's the raw number. So the issue of non-local traffic and the issue of speeding traffic, in my mind, they're related, but they are two different problems. And I guess I want to make that clear. When we're talking tonight, we're focusing more on the issue of speeding traffic, because I really don't have any feasible solutions to the issue of the cut through or non-local traffic. It's just not something you could do without moving or diverting trips from Thunderhead Canyon onto West Glen Farms or some other road, or eliminating access back and forth to Green Pines Elementary School or Lafayette High School. It would be very disruptive, and there's going to be winners and losers in the end of that, in the final action. And it might benefit Thunderhead Canyon, but it's going to be at the expense of another road, potentially West Glen Farms or some other road. So I just don't have a feasible solution to the issue of the non-local traffic. However, that could be studied in more detail. And as I've said before, if that's the desire of the board, I would recommend hiring a consultant such as the Lockmiller Group or a firm like that to dive more deeply into that subject. So next I want to shift and talk again more about the speeding traffic issue. Not so much the non-local traffic, although I guess I could pause at this point, and if there's any questions relative to that, maybe I'd be glad to take them if you want to go that route. Otherwise, I'll move on. So relative to the topic of speeding traffic, at this point, it's really an issue of trying to manage that traffic the best we can. Wildwood Precinct has been very active in this and doing numerous speed surveys, and have been on site providing enforcement. And I did provide in my memorandum some of the more recent speed surveys, or at least 7 speed surveys that have been completed dating back to 2015 for you. And what I would say is what we look at primarily from the department's perspective, we look at the 85th percentile speed, and that's the speed at which 85% of the vehicles are traveling at or slower. So that's the kind of the key measure that we typically use to establish speed limits. And ideally, we'd have a speed limit that's set just at or below that 85th percentile speed, because folks will typically drive the speed they feel is reasonable and safe in their mind. On minor collector streets, we typically see, and we have seen over many years of taking speed surveys, speeds in the range of 27, 28, even 29 miles per hour. That's common in what we see. And most of the complaints we get are on streets similar to Thunderhead Canyon. A lot of times they do serve a collector road purpose. They're not going to be just strictly a local road where you're serving a cul-de-sac with a handful of homes. It's usually a longer road that does have a collector purpose. So I wanted to point out, though, in the speed surveys that I provided in my memorandum, if you're looking at it, that we do have a couple instances where the 85th percentile was above 30 miles an hour. And those were taken at 426 Thunderhead Canyon. We had a couple other ones taken at Still Creek Pass and Wolf Creek Pass. Those are the 2 intersections to the north. But the 2 at 426 Thunderhead Canyon that were 30 miles an hour or more are a little concerning, because again, we've always, in the past, at least since I've been around, we've typically said when the 85th gets to be 30 miles an hour or more, that's when it's concerning and we really should be looking to try to do something. So that's really what I've been keying on in this report to you all, is those 2 speed surveys at 426 Thunderhead Canyon. Now that location is actually down on a downgrade from Still Creek Pass and Wolf Creek Pass, which are closer to Clayton Road. So the road drops down as you leave and go away from Clayton Road on a downgrade. And I believe that's the primary cause of those higher speeds at 426 Thunderhead Canyon. And I'm assuming Captain Mundell would agree with that. And if not, he's more than happy to contradict me, I'm sure. But I believe that that's really the root cause of what's going on at 426 Thunderhead Canyon. So this is all leading to some recommendations that I think are we'd like to move forward with, and we're bringing these to you tonight. So there's 2 primary recommendations in my report to the board, based in large part on the speed survey information. So the first, and this has been recommended in discussion with Dave McGinnis, excuse me, I forget the name. We do have Dave McGinnis, who is a trustee, and he is on the call with us as an attendee tonight. Dave's a trustee with the Village of Winding Trails. If you're traveling in that area, we have kids, Keep Kids Alive, Drive 25 signs, and you may have seen them around. We have them on West Glen Farms Drive. We actually have them on Prospector Ridge Road as well, which intersects Thunderhead Canyon. The original intent with those signs was to implement them and allow double enforcement or double fines to violators that are ticketed in those areas. So they do have that, and it's written in our code that can be the case. So the double fines can be written on tickets in the Keep Kids Alive, Drive 25 enforcement areas. In the past, we haven't had these much since I've been with the board or with the city, so we really haven't had this come up much. But my understanding has always been that we tried to implement those only in areas where they were public spaces, mainly parks and schools. Now, as I just referenced, in our code, we actually have a Keep Kids Alive Drive 25 enforcement area on the entire length of West Glen Farms. Now, clearly there are some parks, there's schools nearby, but it's in our current traffic schedules, the entire length of West Glen Farms, and it's also in the traffic schedule, the entire length of Prospector Ridge. So what I'm recommending is let's consider doing it on Thunderhead Canyon as well, the entire length of Thunderhead Canyon. That would go from West Glen Farms all the way to Clayton Road. So that was the one recommendation. And then the second recommendation would be to move forward. And we have done this, I know some of you are aware, we have implemented installation of LED radar signs, solar powered radar signs. We have 3 of them so far that we've installed on area roadways. I think they're a great tool. When we put them out, they've been well received. They really do add, so they add to the ability of residents to recognize the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit and also recognize if they're speeding. So they've been well received, and we're recommending that we would do another one here on Thunderhead Canyon. And the location that we think it needs to be is near that 426 residence on the hill on the downgrade in that vicinity. So that was primarily the 2 recommendations: the Keep Kids Alive Drive 25 enforcement area on the entirety of Thunderhead Canyon, and then the permanent LED radar sign as well, the one installation on Thunderhead Canyon near 426. So with that, I'll stop talking, and I'll open it up for any questions from the board at this time.
Okay. Chris?
So I think it reasonable probably to think that, I think I'm in favor of both of those. I think they really work in tandem well. Is it reasonable to put the LED sign a short distance from the turn on from Clayton onto Thunderhead prior to the incline? Just so people are more cognizant of that before they even hit it. So maybe they'll be a little bit more aware of their speed before they might even have to slam on the brakes going down the hill, when or not they see that other sign.
Well, that could be considered. I will tell you that we do have a speed limit sign currently installed at that location.
Okay.
So the thought was more in lines of you keep a speed limit sign there, but catch them as they start to go downgrade. Okay. To keep them from speeding as they're going downgrade. So I think our preference would be to put it closer to the downgrade, not further to the north, quite frankly. There may be some other things we could do if the board wants to go that direction to enhance the visibility of that sign. I have committed to Dave McGinnis that, and I think we've got most of this done, that we would put, and the department routinely puts the slow children at play signs. You've probably seen them, they're the yellow signs. Mm-hmm. We routinely put those out and typically pair them with a speed limit 25 sign. So I've committed to Mr. McGinnis, we would do that on all the speed limit signs in that area. And I think we pretty much got them covered, but if we haven't, we'll make sure we get them up. So that one, as they turn in off of Clayton, they would see both the speed limit 25 and the slow children at play sign.
So then on the downhill slope, though, as they begin to pick up speed, that is where the LED sign would be to let the driver know you are indeed going faster.
That was the department's thought, yes.
Okay. Vince and then Steve.
Could we also put on, we can change the signage and indication that the fines would double? I'm assuming if that is the case with this Keep Kids Alive area, can we include somehow signage that the fines would double? And then from an enforcement standpoint, and I certainly don't know Captain Mondell's job, but can we tighten the enforcement from like 35 perhaps down a hair to where they actually get a ticket at, I don't know, 30 something, but that's obviously within that component. And the last question is, if we make these changes, we had talked about this last meeting, does it require a change to the Wildwood traffic schedule? Does there have to be some legislation that authorizes the changes?
Yeah, so Mr. Loyal, yes, we would, assuming the recommendation is approved by y'all tonight, we would take it to City Council. The Keep Kids Alive Drive 25 enforcement zone would have to be added to the traffic schedule, which would be an ordinance change. And I think I can commit to you that, or if you want to make it part of your motion, we can, I'm pretty sure we can put if it's not on that sign, I almost thought it was on that sign, but maybe it isn't. We can add a separate plaque potentially below it that says fines are doubled or something to that effect.
Thank you.
Yeah, Steve.
Thank you. I'm in total agreement of the signage that Rick is proposing. However, this question is going to be directed to the captain. because at the end of the day, it's all about enforcement. Signs are signs, but fines are not doubled unless someone is actually pulled over and issued a citation, which then goes to the municipal court, and the judge doubles those fines. So I'm just curious what we're going to be doing from the Wildwood precinct perspective in terms of enforcing this new signage. Sorry to put you on the spot, Captain, but it's a pretty important question, because signs in themselves will help. Certainly, people will see that and hopefully slow down. But at the end of the day, they're going to stop. They're going to ignore the signs. So I'm just curious what you all are going to be doing, because obviously it puts more pressure on you and your team to enforce that signage.
Well, there's a couple things in play here. So first and foremost, when those new signs go up, we'll ensure, or I'll ensure that there's a presence there to have some effect, hopefully, on that increased signage. As far as issuing tickets, and Steve, we've had this conversation over the past year or two, probably. Things have changed. Issuing traffic citations are totally an officer's discretion. There is a state statute that was passed post Ferguson, we'll call it. I cannot direct. It's illegal for me to direct police officers to issue tickets, to have a quota, to tell them what they can or cannot do as far as writing tickets. So I can't go in there and say, or I can't go to a roll call and say, I want tickets issued at 5 miles over the speed limit or 6 miles over the speed limit. It's just not an area that I can do anything with. Now I've been on the police department a long time, and that conversation has changed over the years. But unfortunately, within the last couple of years, it went to the state legislature, and it is illegal for me to bring up, any kind of ticket talk, honestly. Whether I agree or not is kind of irrelevant, but that's where it stands. Certainly make a presence there.
That's the point.
To drive home the fact that those signs are there and that steps are being taken. So
right, and you're absolutely right, Captain, and I'm glad that you pointed out. You and I have talked about it, but that's good information for this board to understand that your hands are tied and you can't do that. And that really wasn't the gist of my question in terms of that, but in terms of just visibility, for whatever period of time. I know that you only have a limited number of officers, and you have a budget and all those kinds of things. But I was hoping that you would say what you just did, which was you'll be able to change the schedule or whatever, just to make sure that the presence is there, certainly at the beginning, and then however frequent you deem it necessary to show that we're serious about enforcing those signs.
Right. And obviously we're focusing on this location. Wildwood is a very large place. This is not a unique, and I think the marshal mentioned that at the beginning. This is not a unique situation. This frustration exists on every road and on every in every subdivision, that your friends and neighbors don't obey the speed limit, and we do our best to try and address that. But there's just no way for us to catch everybody. Speed surveys, they help me point my troops to where they need to be. And when the majority of traffic is at 5 or 6 miles an hour over the speed limit, that's not as terrible a problem as some of these other roads where we have other data. We have crashes, we have much higher speeds. That the objective of the enforcement is to prevent those crashes, prevent those injuries. Unfortunately, bad things happen out on the roads, and we need to be addressing where that's happening. And a lot of times these subdivision issues are not being addressed, as much as the residents would like. I can't put a cop on every quarter, unfortunately. So we end up, spreading ourselves out. And like I said, Wildwood's a big place, so we get spread pretty thin to address these issues. And this particular street is no different than the 25 or 30 other streets where these same issues are reported, and we do our best to try and address them. So.
Okay. Well, Mr. Marshall, I will say that Rick and the captain and I have received numerous phone calls and many emails from Mr. Kinkle. Rightfully so. He is concerned and so forth. He's been a loud voice in bringing this to our attention. I'm very pleased with the work that Rick has done in terms of identifying some solutions that are costly, that will allow the show that the city is in fact being responsive to him. I mean, we've tried to do a number of things, so I'm happy that we have what I consider to be a pretty viable solution on the table for you all to consider. So I'm happy that we can do that, and then with the captain's help, I think hopefully we will be able to help Mr. Kinkle.
Okay. Any other questions for Vince, please?
I don't have any questions. I would like to make a motion to approve the recommendation by Rick to change the signage and the other, but also include, and perhaps you want to do this as a separate motion, the retention or evaluating the retention of a qualified engineering firm to determine possible solutions. I don't think we've done that in previous years where it's been addressed. I don't know that, but we can either do it as one motion or two, your discretion.
Steve?
Thank you. Mr. Loyal, I appreciate the initial part of your recommendation. However, the second part, I would ask Mr. Brown to consider his budget with regards to having a traffic study done. These are not inexpensive, and I doubt that he has the money in his 2021 budget to do another traffic study. Rick, you can talk about that, but these are not inexpensive propositions. So I'd like him to answer that question before you finalize your motion.
Well, I guess I would suggest, yeah, as you mentioned, maybe breaking that out into two motions, if that's okay. Because I would ask for some clarity on, if we hired an engineer, exactly what you're looking for there. Because again, we talked about the issue of the non-local traffic. Is that what you would like looked at, or is it strictly the issue of speeding traffic and looking at additional measures that could be implemented?
Well, okay, let me change I would like to step back from my original combined motion. The first motion, I recommend that we support the changes in signage and fines, if you will, that were recommended by department staff and Mr. Brown in his report.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to support the proposal. Is any other discussion or questions? I think, Vince, you had inquired before about whether we should or can post a notice on there about fines doubling.
Right.
Is that part of your motion as well?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Do I see a second? We do. So we have a motion. It is seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the proposal as proposed amended with the addition of the fines doubling notice on the sign, please say aye.
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 Opposed, please say nay. It is unanimous and it has passed. Vince?
I'd like to make a motion that in accordance with the recommendation made in Mr. Brown's letter to Board of Public Safety this year, as well as 2019, in which I think the comments were verbatim, that, and I don't know the specifics of what would be included in that other than what's in the document that you provided, that your department would recommend hiring a qualified engineering firm to analyze this problem and recommend possible solutions. So that would be my recommendation. as far as the issues, the funding and that, Mr. Cross, yeah, that's probably a different division than we're at, but I would make a recommendation that we at least put it on your table for consideration, especially in light of looking at the left-hand turn at West Glen Farms. I mean, again, I've not been exposed to this for a long period of time, but it seems like there's no comparison of the two. Perhaps I'm wrong. That's my motion.
Do I hear a second? So we can have the discussion. And the motion has been seconded. Any discussion? So just in an effort to flesh it out, as far as the traffic survey, would it be to address the issue of what does appear to be large volume? I am not a traffic engineer, so I don't know if volume will drive speed. I am receptive to the idea of stop signs where appropriate, but I'm not an engineer to understand. And I don't know if a stop sign on a downhill slope it is actually a good idea or not, depending, again, on the volume of traffic. And would such a stop sign, I guess, generate more jams, if you will, or create a different traffic issue? But perhaps that's what the survey could tell us.
Well,
please, Chris.
In consideration of looking at the potential long-term effects of the added signage, I mean, is a potential future study maybe more in line with looking if patterns change? I mean, I don't know if we'd have as much interest in tracking through traffic in the future if residents are seeing maybe less, speeders coming through, maybe noticing less volume. You hate to preemptively do a study if we might be able to, resolve the problem here with just some added signage and some maybe enhanced enforcement at times. Not to say that it's going to solve it, but it seems reasonable maybe to do a first attempt before we jump to that conclusion.
Thoughts? Vince, what do you think?
All I'm doing is going from the exact verbiage in the report that says, for this matter to be fully evaluated, the department would recommend hiring a qualified engineering firm to analyze this problem and recommendation for possible solutions. So my motion is simply to concur with the recommendations of the department.
and if I can say one thing on that, just to be clear, that was a recommendation relative to the issue of the non-local traffic. It wasn't an issue. It wasn't a recommendation relative to additional studies relative to speeding traffic. Not that that couldn't be done. We could do a traffic calming study or something of that nature. But my comment was relative to the non-local traffic, the cut-through traffic. Are there measures that could be taken to reduce the volume of traffic on Thunderhead Canyon?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, and then I guess I would ask Mr. Brown, are you suggesting now that you wouldn't recommend doing the study at this time? If that's the case, then I'll withdraw my motion.
No, I think it's a long-standing concern and it gets raised periodically. And to my knowledge, we've not done a study to really dive into that. Now, I have thought about it quite a bit since I've been here. And as I said, I've not come up with any obvious solutions on my part. Now, yes, you're correct. We hired Lockmiller to look at Truman Road. That's another long-standing issue that I didn't have a really good recommendation. I wanted to get a second opinion on it. It was a big issue. So that's why I raised it. I felt it's a big enough issue that it does warrant spending a little bit of money to get a second opinion from a qualified traffic engineering firm. I don't know what that would cost, but we could inquire and get a handle on, is it a $20,000 study? Is it a $100,000 study? I don't think it's $100,000. I think it's more like a $20,000. But I could try to get more information in that regard and bring it back to the board if you'd like me to do that. And that could be discussed at a later meeting potentially.
Well, I think in light of the fact that we are doing something, whether it'll be effective or not, to Chris's point, remains to be seen. So I would be willing to withdraw my motion for the study with the caveat that we put it on the agenda for our next meeting to at least revisit for a follow-up. If you can just do a cursory review to see what something may cost, that'd be fine.
I would be glad to do that.
All right. Since it was your motion, Vince, we will consider it withdrawn. I'm curious. So with regards to the signage, both the speed limit and then the LED sign, how soon can we get that done, do you think?
Well, we will move forward as fast as possible.
I don't mean to put you on the spot. It's just more of a curiosity than anything else.
The signs that we can do, I think in a month, hopefully less than that. I'm optimistic. We've got to order them. The Keep Kids Alive signs are kind of a proprietary item that we've got to get. So I don't know how quickly we'll get those. But once we get them, we'll get them up within a few days, frankly.
That was more my question, I guess, is, what do we have on hand versus what do we have to order and wait for?
Yeah, unfortunately, the Keep Kids Alive signs, we'll have to order those. And so there is some time there involved. But we'll do our best to get them up within 30 days. The LED sign, it took us a while to get the last one. Hopefully the turnaround's a little quicker now. It seemed like the pandemic might have been playing into that a bit. But as soon as we get the A-OK, and I feel that's something that the department can do out of our operating budget, as long as Mr. Cross is okay with it. And I don't need to go to council with that necessarily. The Keep Kids Alive zone, because it is a traffic schedule change, I do need to take that as legislation to city council.
Right.
So there is that also, that other aspect that's got to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
At least if we could get the LED up, people could see that they are speeding.
Now, what I would propose there, I'm sorry, I'm getting long-winded.
Nope.
I know Captain has one, and actually Public Works has a battery-powered one as well. So we could also install a temporary battery-powered one potentially more quickly and just get that out on the street in the meantime to show we're doing something.
Okay, Vince, please.
The costs that are associated with these type of activities, is this Prop P money or is this come out of your general operating budget? I mean, relative to public safety. I mean, I just don't know. No,
that's a perfect question. I'm smiling because I'm waiting for Captain Munda to volunteer to take it out of his budget, but it comes out of Public Works, and no, we do have some budget items that we can pull it from, and we usually set aside some monies every year for this purpose. So it would come out of Public Works operating budget.
So the Prop P money, does this committee have a chance to discuss that at some point prior to New Year's budgets?
It has come up every year, and we discuss that annually.
What's the time frame on that? Just out of curiosity.
It'll be your next meeting.
Okay.
Yes.
And okay, good. Can we get, and I guess I would ask, can we get a little bit of a heads up on that? If it's going to be a pretty comprehensive document regarding it, I'd like to have it a week or so ahead of time if I could.
Yeah. All right. Rick's looking at me. I can see.
I'll wait for you to say something.
So I will speak up. The mid-year budget review is in process right now, and we are going to be taking that to council. But in terms of the 2022 budget, this should come up later on this agenda with regards to because we have to move this meeting date, right, Rick? So that needs to be discussed. So the meeting date in October needs to be moved because there is a pretty tight time frame, Mr. Loyal, in terms of when the documents are given to the department heads, when they prepare their 2022 budget, then it comes to me and the finance officer for review, and that's quite an undertaking to take all that, and the mayor gets involved in that as well. So it's a kind of a tight time frame before it ends up going back to council. But the police services budget will be reviewed at the October meeting of this group, which will actually be moved. And I'm sorry, Marshall, I don't want to steal your thunder, but it'll be moved a week earlier or something along those lines. But as Rick said, it will be discussed at the next meeting. So to the extent that we're able to get that budget, we'll get it out into your hands as soon as we can, so that you do have some time to absorb it. It's not a real big budget, so we may be able to turn the police services budget around pretty quick. The captain has not led me to believe that he wants to go and buy a whole heck of a lot of stuff. Most of the money goes to pay for the doggone contract, but there are a few things here and there that he'd like to buy. Hopefully not many more electric bicycles, because those cost a fortune. But so anyway, you'll be seeing it pretty soon here in October.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Perfect.
Steve, have you been in touch with Lieutenant Schaefer as of yet?
He has not reached out to me just yet. I would expect that any day, hopefully.
Yeah, I'll get a hold of him, see where he's at. That whole contract, it was time to, pour through it to, bring it in line where it should be. So.
But you did pass along my comment that if he just cuts, whacks off 15%, I'll sign it right now, and we don't have to review it.
All right.
It's a simple thing.
Sounds
Just
like it's
that simple.
All right.
I was going to add to what Rick had said, that we do have a couple of the LED speed signs, speed display signs that we can certainly put in place. We have a couple of those for just this purpose of moving them around, to address, issues at various places without Rick putting one in permanently. So that's why we have them. So.
Okay. So we can get that done quickly.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Looking at the agenda, we have one new business item. It was brought up earlier in the comment section, but it's the Lafayette parents parking in the Dartmouth subdivision. So, Rick.
All right, thank you, Mr. Marshall. This is a recent topic, at least for this board primarily, although the issue of traffic in the Dartmouth subdivision, school traffic in the subdivision is not a new subject, unfortunately. I think we do have some folks that are attendees that are involved in particular. At least one resident, or I guess a couple of residents maybe, that have been involved and have been in discussions with us about some changes relative to the student pickup situation. As I'm sure many of you probably know, when Rockwood went back to school recently, they made some changes with their bus pickup and they cut routes. They had to save some money or couldn't hire drivers. And as a result, they cut the number of bus routes they had and aren't picking up, I think, within a mile of most schools. So the end result is that they're seeing more kids walk. And then at Lafayette, we're seeing also more kids being picked up, presumably by parents or caregivers or guardians. So it's creating some issues with Lafayette High School and their ability to handle that volume of parent pickup traffic internally on their parking lot. They've struggled with it, to be quite frank, in the opening week or so of school and classes. We've seen the parking lot and this is primarily, I think, the afternoon dismissal period, which is around 3:20. We've seen, unfortunately, that queue of cars trying to pick up, backing out onto Clayton Road, and I think even early on onto Route 109. So we've been aware of this due to residents in Dartmouth calling and bringing the issue to our attention. Captain Mundell has been at the forefront, and his officers have been out helping address the situation. They have, and I'll let Captain Mundell talk to that himself, but I know that they've met more recently with the administrative staff at the high school and have recommended some changes in terms of how they handle that flow of traffic in the afternoon dismissal period. And they've also gone, and so what happens is when parents want to pick up their kids and they don't want to wait in the long queue to get through the parking lot, with the beauty of cell phones, they arrange to pick up their kid across the street in Dartmouth. So primarily in Dartmouth Crossing Drive, they pull in, they make a U-turn at some point, and then they wait for a minute or two or whatever it takes, and the kid walks across the street and hops in the car and away they go. So to help combat the situation, Wildwood Precinct early on did put some no parking signs up, some temporary no parking signs, primarily on Dartmouth Crossing, which is immediately opposite the signal into Lafayette. That seems to have helped the situation in large part at that location. Before I get too far in this, I should point out, I referenced that this is not a new issue, primarily with Dartmouth. They have struggled with student parking, from my understanding, for some time. Not necessarily the parent pickup so much, but student parking. And there are signs posted in the subdivision that limit parking on street to 3 hours. So, and that was done some years ago to combat the student parking issue. And I think by and large, that problem is under control. But the problem now is the issue of parents picking up their kid, pulling in and waiting for the kid to cross the street and get picked up. So, Captain, do you want to add any more about some of your involvement as of late?
Sure. So all schools create a traffic issue, and it's usually a set time frame. There's a huge volume of traffic that is trying to get to that same location at the same time. So as far as solving that there will never ever be an issue with the high school, that's not going to be the conclusion here. Something we did within the last week is to get a good picture of it, is use a drone where we could go up overhead and see the whole picture, see the driveway, the main entrance, what's happening on Clayton Road, what's happening on 109, and what's happening on at their east entrance also. So it's a lot of moving parts happening at once. And if you're standing on the street, you're not necessarily able to see. So it's an amazing picture just to see what is all happening at one time. And a lot of it is traffic crisscrossing or trying to crisscross each other in the driveway entrance. That's pretty much the bottleneck. But their system of drop-offs and pickups, so that there's a lot of moving parts there is what we're looking at. So I did talk with our school officer. We have an officer assigned at Lafayette, and working with the principal and their traffic management person for their facility. This week they're making some adjustments. So this is going to be kind of a work in progress. The objective is when you look overhead and you see lots of open space, open parking spaces, can they shuffle cars that are sporadically parked on the outer fringes, push them into the middle, and then be able to stage traffic better in areas that can be left open. The other thing that I was reminded of is right now about half of the students there drive. So you're looking at juniors and seniors. The freshmen and sophomores don't, but down the road, a lot of the sophomores are going to end up turning 16 and getting their driver's license, further into the year. So those drivers or that traffic may increase a little bit there too. So I basically put it in their lap. This is not for the police to come in here onto their property and tell them how to handle their traffic. I can tell them that what they're doing right now is causing other issues. Backing out onto Clayton Road, backing out or continuing that out to Highway 109, where the electric signals are not efficient. When traffic stops, the lights keep cycling and people aren't making it through the lights like they should. So that's kind of the ripple effect. If they can do a better job managing on their property, which I think they can, and they are making the effort to do it, it'll have a better effect on traffic outside of their property. It's not going to solve it. Traffic will not suddenly disappear. There will still be backups when it's time to drop kids off, when it's time to pick up. The parents are obviously the ones that are causing some of the frustration here, that they don't want to be part of the program, that, hey, there's a system in place, you need to follow the system and it'll work. when you bypass the system and park in the subdivision across the street, which was what was brought to our attention immediately, was you blocked a school bus from getting in and out. So that caused another problem. And that was a middle school bus, that had really nothing to do with the high school. So we were able to put those signs in there pretty quick and kind of nip that a little bit. Rick's addressing the more permanent signage. And I always want to caution with making permanent solutions to a temporary problem. So that this gets posted, the ordinance is the ordinance. It can't affect the residents that are in there. So there can't be exceptions that, well, the student can't park here, but I can. So there are dangers there that the ordinance has to be applied, blindly, basically, that the residents are asking for this. And there's probably not a lot of cars that need to park on the street or that do park on the street. So that's why, Rick and I certainly want the residents to be involved in these decisions and basically sign off on what they would like, because it's going to affect them. That's where they live. These traffic issues shouldn't interrupt their day and overturn the operations of their subdivision. So their recommendations, their approvals is very important to what Rick needs to do as far as signage and adjusting ordinances, things like that. So I'm very optimistic that the school district's working on this and will make an effort, is making an effort to improve how they're handling their traffic management. So this week is kind of a messed up week, obviously. The holiday, and I think they were not in school on Tuesday, so the staff really wasn't there till yesterday to kind of address it and get something worked out. And then they have to get the notice out to all the families and the parents that things are changing. So it's like I said, a work in progress. It may be another week or two before we see some things running smoothly, that adjustments are made or not made, to accommodate that. So it's well underway. We certainly appreciate the residents bringing this forward, for us. They provided pictures and video, and there was no doubt that it really just took the phone call that, hey, this is going on, for us to get in there and look at it firsthand. And they went through the effort of providing some pictures and some video of what they were seeing. That certainly drives the point home. So we appreciate that.
So, Mr. Marshall, if I can, I wouldn't mind picking back up on that, if that's all right. So I did want to point out, in addition to what Captain Mundell and the Wildwood Precinct have been involved in, I've had numerous discussions over the last day or so, even in the last week, with one of the residents, Mark Cohen. I think he's on the call, and Trustee Steve Sherrick, about what would work for them as more of a permanent signing change to address this issue. I think that even hopefully the situation will improve and will be handled much better. My fear is, and I've seen it already on other occasions, is that there's always going to be a demand for some parents to pick up their kids in Dartmouth when they are in a hurry, and they got to get the kid to soccer practice that starts at 4 o'clock, and they just don't want to wait in that line on the lot. So kind of with that in mind, and based on the feedback I've gotten from the trustee and Mr. Cohen, the resident, we're recommending moving forward with the installation of some additional signs on Dartmouth Crossing. At this point, this is the road that's directly opposite the high school at the signal. There's also Dartmouth Crest to the east. So the recommendation I'm bringing to you is relative to signing changes on Dartmouth Crossing at the signal only. Well, as far as the first recommendation, which is to implement signage that would restrict stopping or standing in the morning arrival period and in the PM dismissal period. And I think the hours that we've kind of settled on, as was referenced in the comments, would be like a 2-hour period in the morning to allow for the late start, and then an hour in the evening. And the thought would be we would implement this on Dartmouth Crossing all the way down to the T intersection. So it wouldn't be beyond the all-way stop at the T intersection, if you're familiar with that location. So that would be the main stretch of the road till it comes to the all-way stop. And with that recommendation is to consider putting in a no U-turn sign at the entrance to the subdivision right there on Clayton Road. And that could potentially be done at both Dartmouth Crossing and Dartmouth Crest, to try to discourage traffic from the idea that they can turn in there and immediately turn around, for the purpose of just stopping briefly to pick up a kid. So those are kind of the two recommendations. I think we can do both of those for less than $1,000. There is some cost involved, but I think we can get it done in relatively short order, and hopefully less than 1 month, quite frankly, because those signs are much easier to get. So we are going to continue monitoring Dartmouth Crest on the east side. From what we're hearing is some of those folks that are doing the pickup have moved over there. And I think Captain and I need to talk probably further about that, but we want to monitor that situation closely and respond with temporary signs there if that's the desire of the trustees, and monitor Dartmouth Crest. And if there's a desire to put more signs over there, this might show back up on the agenda potentially for that request at a future meeting. So with that, I'll finish up and I'll avail myself to any questions.
Okay, I just have one quick question just to clarify, because I know the document said 8 to 9, but I think you said you would like to see a 2-hour window in the morning, 8 to 10.
That's correct, sir. Yes, 2 hours in the morning.
It brought that up as well. So
yes.
Just to be clear, so you're recommending that the plan be 8 to 10?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. Vince, then Jim.
Just a question, do we know the thoughts of the council members for this area regarding this?
Well, I can't speak for them directly. I will tell you, Mr. Loyal, that Mr. Bertolino, I'm surprised he wasn't on this because he did bring this, excuse me, originally, I think he got a phone call from a resident, and then he brought it to us immediately and asked that it be in front of y'all tonight. So I'm pretty certain he would favor this approach. I've not heard anything to the contrary, but I know he's personally been contacted, and I'm sure would like to see us take some actions.
Okay, Governor McCutcheon's the other council member, correct?
That is correct, yes.
We don't know her thoughts regarding that?
No, sir, I've not had a discussion or heard from her directly about this, but I'm sure she would like us to be as responsive to the residents as we can.
And just for future reference for me, historically, if we're going to try and discuss something within an individual council district, do we try to give the council members a heads up regarding we're having this discussion, or do we leave it? I know that they're on the agenda information, so I didn't know if we touched base with them historically initially or not. So, okay.
And they do receive an invite to the meeting, or a courtesy copy of the agenda, essentially. Obviously, so the restrictions would be an ordinance that would be enacted by city council for the signs, the no stopping and starting. I probably should clarify that. So that would go to city council next, assuming you all approve it at your level. So they will know of it at that point in time for sure.
Well, I know if Mr. Bartolino brought to your attention, obviously he supports it. So I just would hate to send something to council that the council members that are district involved are going to oppose it. So,
Mr. Loyal, all council members are ex officio members of every committee, and they receive invites to every committee, every committee meeting that we have. So they are aware of the agenda, et cetera. It's possible that some of the emails regarding Dartmouth that had Mr. Bertolino on it also had Ms. McCutcheon on it. I don't know that for a fact, but those two council members in particular do share information between each other. So I'd be surprised if Councilmember McCutcheon wasn't aware of this. But they do see the agenda and they see the invite for every committee meeting.
All right, thank you.
And I do know we've had participation in the past, depending on certain issues where council members have either attended the meeting or have spoken to us in advance. So, all right, so we have a proposal on the floor from the city to install the signage. As it's a proposal from the city, I'll accept that as the motion. Is there a second? Thank you, Chris. Any further discussion? I do make note that Rick, you did say that you've spoken to the trustees, that they are in favor of this.
I have spoken to Steve Sherrick, and he is on the call. If you all would like to hear from him, I'm sure he'd be glad to be promoted to a participant. But I know he's very in favor of it. And again, we're looking at installing it on both sides, just to clarify, both sides of Dartmouth Crossing. Initially, we were looking at maybe just the west side, but I think the more we've talked, the residents would like to see it on both sides. So as long as residents are in favor of it and there's no strong opposition, we were planning on doing both sides of the road.
Okay, very good. And I know we've heard from Mr. Aston, and he certainly did express support for that. So any discussion on the motion?
Just one question, really,
Please.
Mr. Marshall. Are these initial signs just going to be installed on a temporary basis then, and then let's see how things play out, or are these on a permanent basis moving forward?
So that's a good question. So as I referenced, we do already have no parking signs in the subdivision on I think mostly on existing posts. So the plan would be to utilize those posts
Okay.
for the new signs. Yes, we don't, the preference would be not to install new posts at all if we can do it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Rick, and I guess what I was going to say earlier, kind of a point of information and kind of answers his question. There is an ordinance that allows myself, with the approval of Public Works, to make more or less emergency or temporary no parking. So, what came up there on a Friday, I think, on Monday, we had the signs in place, and they're the obvious temporary sign. It's a wood stick, and it's a bright orange sign. An officer will go out there and they post them, but there's a formality of me doing it with the authorization of Public Works, so that it's enforceable. If we wrote tickets on those temporary signs, there's documentation that the procedure was followed within the ordinance. But that's meant to be temporary, and we don't really define temporary. I don't want those signs in place for 6 months. The sun's going to fade them. They're going to get pulled out. They're going to get run over, that type of thing. So temporary is temporary, couple weeks, perhaps 30 days. We want something in action, and that was the purpose of the meeting tonight, or having that on the agenda, that action is being taken, that those signs will disappear because the permanent ones are going to replace them, basically. So that was all.
Did it again. So we have a motion on the floor. I think we've had a discussion. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Hearing none, it is unanimous and it is passed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick and Captain Mundell. So that appears to be the last item that we have listed on the agenda, other than meeting date. Vince? Oh, you're on mute. It's catching.
There he goes.
At the last meeting, there had been some discussion regarding the pavement on Old State Road, and I know Captain Mundell was going to have a discussion with Department of Public Works. I'm just curious to follow. Were we able to be successful in changing that pavement?
Well, I won't say that. I've been in touch with the county Department of Transportation. They wanted to review some of those accidents, I think, more specifically. Today, just more us out of curiosity, I pulled our crash stats. And I don't know if 2020 was just the anomaly, but the first 8 months of 2020, there was 15 accidents on Old State, kind of in that southern edge. And in the first 8 months of this year, there's only been 5. So that's, it's just an odd thing, but we are following through with County Department of Transportation. I didn't put it on the agenda this time around because I don't really have,
Okay.
we aren't done with our assessment basically, but I did contact them immediately and we are working on something together. So hopefully next meeting, have some conclusion for that. They did tell me that road was paved within the last 5 years. So the thought that it would be, worn out or polished or something like that would be unusual. So who knows? It could be, perhaps something was, spilled along the roadway or something like that, and it just over time has gone away. We don't know. So, but we are continuing to rue it, and I'll have something next time around.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. The only other item is the meeting date proposed for October 14. Is that the date we prefer, Steve? I know we had to move it.
No, right now, October, the Board of Public Safety is scheduled for October the 7th. And I'm asking if you all would agree to move it to the 14th to accommodate the schedule for review of the police services contract for the 2022 budget year.
Sure. I don't have a particular concern with that date, gentlemen.
I mean,
Okay. The 14th it is,
Thank you.
without objection. So, anything else for the good of the order? Oh, Jim?
One other item, of course, you're probably seeing it backwards, but the sign in my background here, this little sign came out of a discussion that the Department of Conservation is putting a rock climbing wall on some property along Highway 109. And it's kind of in an odd spot that if you're there, you don't necessarily know exactly where you're at, but if something bad were to happen, like someone were to be injured, we developed this sign and it'll have the address of the location. So it'll be on the parking lot there. And we have several of these signs, so we're going to actually put them in the rest of the parks, city parks, so that if something were to happen, an injury, when they're calling 911, they know exactly the address of where they're at. So each park has an address. This climbing wall location, the address is actually on Highway 109, which no one would know because there's nothing there. It's wooded area. But there's actually a cross street that we had an address made for that location that will, pinpoint through the 911, CAD system. So, so these signs will start popping up in a couple different places, just as a reminder, something you can snap your picture of that, if you're on the trails or something like that, where to send the police, fire department, ambulance, wherever. So.
Very good. Thank you. With that, I think we have reached the end of the agenda. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second. Oh,
Chris, I assume you'll second. There it is. Oh, all those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
I
Opposed, please agree to stay longer. Okay. All right. Again, thank you, everybody. Thank you to everyone. If you're still with us who participated this evening, really appreciate you taking the time. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
In October.